Have you apologized to President Trump, all of you who participated in those impeachment hearings against Donald Trump? You all should be apologizing. You sit here and you attack the president, and I am not going to have it. I'm not going to put up with it.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years.
The Dow right now is over. The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. You're a great stock trader, as I hear, Raskin. The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000. And the NASDAQ smashing records. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about.
You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep?
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question. No.
Unbelievable. It just seems like a desecration.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-hosts, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson, and community college math professor and socialist Michael Hoffman. We're online at whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle as at Don Eduardo Barca. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode where we found this episode. We have merch as well. If you fancy a shirt, contact us through our site at whatsleftpodcast.com. And you can also check out the Spanish version of What's Left Podcast. Que quede de la izquierda. Invite your friends, your community, Spanish-speaking world. Thank you. Andy, what are we talking about that you did not want to talk about today?
Thank you for admitting that. What I did not want to talk about was the stuff around Jeffrey Epstein, the drop of another 3 million files. I didn't want to talk about it, but I told you I didn't want to talk about it. And then I thought you would confirm that you didn't want to talk about it, but apparently I misunderstood you. You did want to talk about it. So we're going to talk about it.
Well, let's try to. We have a history. One of our very first episodes, not very first.
Yeah,
it was still within the realm of the first year, I think, right?
Yeah, 2019. And by the way, do you know how many episodes? Do you know what number episode this will be for us?
400.
Yeah, 402. This will be our 402nd episode.
Wow.
I know. So, but you're right to get our time frame right. An early discussion that you and I had that had some little fire to it was on Jeffrey Epstein. And our show, we started our show in 2018 in May. And I think around July 2019, around that time is when he killed himself. And that was our discussion. Jeffrey Epstein was either, I'm going to say it this way now. That's when Jeffrey Epstein was either murdered or removed from prison and removed from public eye. And we had a debate around whether that was true or not.
Yeah, it was very hard for me at that time to delve into the conspiracy world. I wanted just to go by the facts of things. I remember that. Speculation was very hard for me. But before we continue, I'd like to know if Michael had any thoughts at that time when the whole Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, good question.
Because we know what our thoughts were at the time. But Michael, I don't think we know.
Right.
Well, I didn't. It was at that time I saw it as more like a culture war marker, which stance you took on whether Epstein killed himself or not. But I also thought it makes sense that, one, they used sort of sex trafficking to both satisfy their needs or satisfy their appetites for exploiting and pleasing themselves, but also that the elites, that they also consciously use that to set up blackmail operations about powerful people. Like all of that was clear to me, and it was at the time when he killed himself. It was just an interesting. It was interesting to see the way that that question of him killing himself played out politically, because it was definitely like a way in which, oh, actually at the time, people who were the most adamant that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself were associated actually with QAnon, and they believed that there was a ring of child traffickers that Donald Trump was gonna bust open. Now we see he was one of the main people in it, as opposed to coming to get it. So I don't know.
But what were your
Did he
thoughts?
kill himself? He may have been allowed to kill himself. I mean, like, honestly, like, if when a point someone made recently was that even like if they want to make sure someone doesn't kill themselves, they don't let them have stuff they can kill themselves with in their room. And Jeffrey Epstein had access to tons of stuff he could use to kill himself. So whether or not he did it himself or someone else did it, there was definitely some either I don't know. There was some planned negligence in it. That's like the nicest explanation. Or they killed him. Or, I mean, I don't know. Sorry, I should not have gone on that long on that question.
Well, you didn't really say what you thought.
Mm-hmm.
What do I think?
What did you think at the time?
At the time when it came out that he had killed himself, or if you knew, not if you had knowledge of him prior to that time.
Oh, that's not the kind of thing I immediately have a strong opinion about. So I guess I was explaining, like, yeah, it's completely feasible he killed him. It's completely feasible he killed himself. It's completely feasible, that they got, whatever. He's clearly. So I guess I thought either one was plausible.
But if I was to intuit this at the time, it didn't feature much on your radar as important to be looking into it or thinking about it too much, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the question of did he kill himself or not did not seem, but it was very much. I mean, the whole Epstein thing is just like confirmation of my worldview. It's like these fuckers at the top of society are, not fit to rule. And if, I am wondering why he got in trouble. I guess I'm a little bit like, is it true that he got busted because he went too far? Or did he get busted because, people turned against him? That's actually the question that I have. Like, why are we actually learning about all of this? Why are we really learning about all of this? Was it really because lots of women came out? And I mean, I would like to believe that somewhat that, if you rape too many women, then it adds up, and then society, some segment of society has to, clamp down on you. But I'm also more cynical than that.
Well, I think we should get to the gist of what I think has been in the news lately, and which Trump has been trying to evade answering about. I'm not sure if it's important in the same manner as maybe some of the major mainstream outlets are sharing it. But I read what you shared with us, Andy. I think there's a lot to say there. I've also been contemplating a lot of what I've been hearing and here in Latin America, resurfacing images, interviews, videos of people coming out, like the Mexican model that was in Puerto Vallarta, I think she was, and she was invited to an elite party and she screamed coming out of a hotel. I can post a video clip of it where she was yelling out they were eating humans and no one believed her. and this was 2009, and they thought she'd gone mad, and everyone just took her as a a psychic, like psychic, excuse me, like a psychotic person, like she was gone, too far gone, but she was in desperate need of people to pay attention that they were doing something up at the party where she was at, and video has been recirculating, and she has since disappeared. And so I think what this does for me, the reason why, when you asked me what if I wanted to touch on it, is that I saw another video of, I think it was in Bosnia, or was it Eastern Europe, somewhere in Eastern Europe, where you could pay a certain amount of money to go and basically hunt down humans, shoot them. There was another video that was circulated. So I guess it's what's I'm trying to point at is the sickening, awful, just strange things that rich people do because it's like they cannot be, what's that word? How do you say it in English? Satiated, or when you're satisfied?
Satiated.
Satiated. You're not able to be satiated. So you look for other ways to satisfy yourself. It's like at some point, even like the rich, powerful people who are like Sean Combs, who could have all the women in the world, and at that, it's just like he just was done having sex with women. He wanted to watch his own wife having sexual relationships with someone else, and that's to him what he was getting off. I'm just pointing out just how far people go, and how actually the crazy ones are the people who have so much money and wealth, you know? That's what I wanted to touch on this.
Right.
And it's not just their satisfied needs, it's how they got to those places, the connections they have. That is the most, it's just a network. It's just baffling to see the network of institutions, banks, governments. I think it just points out that we are, it's really us versus them. I tried to say that to my closest friend recently. She thinks I'm sometimes not looking at the human side of administrators and people who are at the upper hierarchy of this capitalist globe. And I'm like, the minute you wear that hat, you are falling into a way of being that overpowers you, that you should be in a psych ward more than the people who are actually of sick mentally, who are going through. I think really these people, the minute you are entering that state of being, it's like being on drugs. I mean, I don't really care people being on drugs. People being on a high, that's what I'm trying to get at, of power. It's just so scary. And so anyhow, I thought we should point that out. Of course, the most obvious is all the sexual abuse scandals that have come out. Of course, we've touched on that. But I think I'm trying to go in deeper to the network of connections that I think I'm observing.
Yeah. The reason this isn't interesting for me is because of the list. Oh, Elon Musk's on it. Oh, Trump's on it. Oh, Bill Clinton's on it. Oh, so and so's on it. Oh, so the list of names. Woody Allen, Dershowitz. There's all this list, these names. I feel like that starts to, for me, it just starts to become pornographic, kind of like a peep show, and hides more than it reveals. That's probably my initial lack of interest. But in forcing this discussion, Eduardo, you have forced me to find what I think is important about this. Like, and I do appreciate that. Like, Not that it is what is important, but what's important to me about it. And I think it is about those connections. And I think it is more like, what is this person's role in the system? And I think the question you asked, Michael, is actually important, because I believe, for me, what's really so useful about having you here, Michael, is you are sort of that, you are still that legacy of to that old left that I was once part of, that I believe ignored things like Jeffrey Epstein for all the wrong reasons, because they saw it as partisan. And in fact, if you go back and listen to our episode on, and I think characters like Jeffrey Epstein are important, actually, because of what they show about how this society is constructed. And if you go back to that initial episode, and we talked about it in 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was very much seen as a Democrat client, like that his clients were part of the Democratic Party, not as much the Republican Party. Now we see equal opportunity dude, like there's no there, and that makes sense, because he is an instrument of the capitalist class, as are all capitalists are instrument of the capitalist class. And so I think the first thing to say, I guess my starting point for this, and then maybe Michael, you can say, is I don't think you can underestimate how deep the lie goes in this thing. And I think the way we heard it was Donald Trump saying, Jeffrey Epstein, you still talking about that? And then people literally who had been politically groomed, their Jeffrey, Trumps and Cash Patels and Don Banginos, their whole clientele is based on thinking that this is a giant pedophile ring. And I'm not saying that is partly what's going on here. I think it goes much worse than that, but a giant pedophile ring that is exposed, and if we expose it, it'll upend the deep state. And he tried to say to those people, well, there's nothing to see here, and like you can, and was willing to say that with a complete bald face, and behind them were what they say are 6 million files, which are only the tip of the iceberg of what really probably was on his island, because apparently these 6 million files are what has been removed in a process that, well before they invaded Epstein Island, they told him, we're coming, get your stuff together. And so there are pictures of like things like, child X connected to Y. Like this was the thing that Michael's bringing up, the whole scheme he has of entrapping people that he is part of, that I do believe is related to him being a CIA, Mossad, MI6 operative as well, which I'm probably going to not talk about as much in this, but that is an element there. Like they lied to your face, and then now they're going to slowly leak out that this was actually happening, and that's how politics works. And I feel like really what this is it just exposes the lie. And I'll share one screenshot that gets to kind of like this other face of this lie. This is an article from NBC News. I don't know what the date on it was, but it's earlier. Jeffrey Epstein, $350,000 contribution and donations to Council on Foreign Relations to go to fight trafficking. That's how this works. Like, we're not going to talk about religion today, but if what is happening is good is being sold to you by people who are evil. And the best thing I can tell you is everything that you are being shown is the good face. And behind that is a demonic horde showing you that. Like, I could just say capitalist class lies, working class truth, but I don't think it quite gets at the difference in reality. And that, to me, that title of that thing basically says this person or this institution which this person operates behind is going to deal with human trafficking or child trafficking, but it's run by child traffickers. So There you go. That's that's capitalism for you. Everything it says to you is a lie, and it hides behind the good that you want the world to be, and it uses that good you want the world to be to hide how awful it's being. And that's the world we live in, and that's why we need a revolution. It cannot that truth cannot be inverted by just cleaning the window. It's not dirt on the window. That what's being shown to you is being shown to you so it can hide what the real operation is behind it, and it's done in an inverted way. And again, that's why I understand why people talk about this in religious terms. You can take the real cross and just invert it upside down to really understand what the interests are behind this.
Well, I want to say that I feel that my position was significantly mischaracterized, and while I do think it is accurate, I am somehow a connection to an older left tradition. No, in no way did I ever say like Jeffrey Epstein is not an important thing to talk about, right? If I understood the first question I was asked was, what do I think about Jeffrey Epstein killing himself or not? Right? And to me, that question is a little bit less important. And I don't know, there was like a theme with me that if you think somehow I'm going to take a side on something that's very, like, whether he killed himself or not, I'm just like, well, I don't know. But to say that this is not somehow brought up or understood through the lens of like a traditional left, I mean, I think that's a gross mischaracterization, Andy. Epstein is and actually I want to show you one of my favorite things that I read was basically all the stuff this Epstein Files shows is basically confirming like almost all of the old left theories that there's a ruling class, and they're a class, and stuff like between these very powerful people gets worked out informally in these backdoor rooms, and that they have huge implications on our lives. That's our tradition, is to look at the Epstein thing and be like, this is exactly a window into the thing that we already knew. The thing that we already knew, because the violence that we see, or like the raping of children, like that, there's already violence that we see every day in everyday production, right? So like we live in a society that constantly externalizes brutality. It externalizes and makes it invisible, right? Not just so we can start with the process of colonialism. How did the U.S. take over all this territory? It was genocide, right? And we know that. That's not a secret. They just try to sanitize it. It's not a secret that they just murder people. I mean, we just saw, so it's very crazy making to live in a world where, all like, once you see the level of violence and rape that holds all these people up, that holds this system up, then suddenly people see a glimpse of it. It's actually a huge, important moment to be like, to help explain why it's actually a systemic thing. It's not this, the system produces those people. And you can tell because they're not going to be held accountable. First of all, is anyone going to actually be punished for any of this? Maybe some political career, people are stepping down from their posts in Europe, but is Donald Trump going to get in trouble for any of this? No. Who's going to get in trouble? Is Bill Gates going to get in trouble? No, they're not going to get in trouble. And the other important, pertinent questions around this is like, why didn't Obama or Biden or any of those other people, like, you think about how Kamala Harris could have used releasing Epstein Files to help her win the election. I mean, just think about how they knew this and they could have released it and said, hey, you know what? Donald Trump is like definitely a pedophile. Here's all this evidence that he's a pedophile. They could have used that right before the election if they wanted to win. So this to me is more evidence that there's just a good cop, bad cop that oversees this disgusting violence. And, but people latch onto these little things about it, like as if it's a key that if everyone just finds out, everything's going to change. And that's the thing that I think is silly. It's like if everyone just knows that like Epstein didn't actually kill himself, then suddenly the thing is going to unravel. It's like, no, it's not going to unravel. When you show people the real violence of the system, they are often horrified, but they don't know what to do about it. And in fact, sometimes they're like mad at you because you showed them the reality and it grosses them out so much. They're like, ew, don't show me that. Like, don't show me the pictures of babies in Gaza. The babies blown to bits in Gaza. I mean, so, yeah, the Epstein stuff just, to me, confirms, like, how fucking unacceptable this system is. So, I'm not sure how the old left who would have ignored Epstein plays in there. I'm not, I'm like, I don't really understand what you mean by that.
I'll get to that.
All right.
That was just my... But I don't, Eduardo, you want to go? Because I have a place.
Well, before you get to it, I wanted to say, you said that this was, it's like the Democrats and the Republicans are in collusion, and in leftist progressive circles, sometimes it's Trump, it's just Trump, it's all his cronies and all. But you see, I made out a list here just of some of the most prominent left-leaning or Democrat-associated names. Of course, Bill Clinton, Al Gore, Bill Gates, Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary under Clinton and Obama, Noam Chomsky, who I've admired and brought out as well. Some people would say he's not, but Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Bill Richardson, former Democratic governor ambassador, Stephen Hawking, physicist as well. And then there's people on the conservative side, Stephen Bannon, of course, Peter Thiel, Alan Dershowitz, and other names. I just want us to see and call out the hypocrisy. I don't want to be a part of that hypocrisy. I think Chomsky wrote to him, this is after, why would he do this too, by the way? If Chomsky wrote in an email to him about things will die down after some time, just wait it out, something like that along the lines, when there was Epstein in the news about one of the scandals he was involved in. And I just thought, well, why would he advise him that? Why was he involved in doing that? And then Stephen Hawking also with these sex workers. I don't know how, that doesn't really matter to me if they're sex workers, because I think that anyone could, if they're consenting to adults. But how many of these people were consenting? How many of these people were underage? So I think it's important just to call out, the bullshit of the left. If there is any integrity, I just haven't heard and seen much criticism on this side of the aisle since it's split in that way. And so I thought it should be mentioned. But anyhow, those are some of the things that have also come to mind as you were saying, that this isn't one way or the other, one side or the other. This is a whole system that is one big bowl of billionaires and rich people and connected folk. But you go ahead. You were going to talk about something that.
Yeah. Michael's right to say that the left has been talking about this, just like people had been talking about big pharma, trying to poison us. And the left has been part of that. People had been talking about how the government is authoritarian and we'll remove free speech. Left has been talking about that for a long time. I completely agree with Michael that they're talking about it, but I do think they missed the boat. I actually would say Jeffrey Epstein, the dismissiveness that the left had around Jeffrey Epstein, thinking of it's like, oh, like you even said, Jeff. I mean, Michael, it was some kind of culture war thing, and it wasn't. There were reasons that people on the right got COVID right and the left got it wrong, and they're very much connected to them not seeing actually that they should have seen it. But I'll give an example because this actually is a starting point for what I really want to talk about with Jeffrey Epstein, which is what you talked about, Michael. The connections, the deep, people call it the deep state. We would call it the web of the capitalist class. Their system, not ours. And you can start to populate that system with names. The names aren't ultimately important because it's a system, and the names will be filled in. If Jeffrey Epstein wasn't there, it'd been somebody else. But I want to start here, and I want to use this to then also make a side case as to, yes, we knew about people like Jeffrey Epstein, but we were completely, as the left, incapable of doing anything meaningful with it to then go forward and really help the working class fight its destroyers. We actually obscured the destroyers. And I'll give you an example here now. Why I keep saying I'm going to give you an example, but let's do it. Two good articles that I think are worth reading about this, and this is one of them. Sayer G is actually somebody who worked with Alison McDowell, and he wrote, and this is from the one that said, breaking the Epstein Files illuminates a 20-year architecture behind pandemics as a business model with Bill Gates at the center of the network. Now, he gets into how these guys were even talking about how we could use pandemics to sell vaccines, to make money and, control. They did that. That's a part of the discussion, but that's not the part I want to talk about. I actually want to talk about there's so many emails, you can decide what's important. And I'm going to use this one to make a case. And this is that mentioned Jess Staley person who I thought was a woman, Michael, but it's a guy, and it's a JP Morgan executive, and it's written in 2011. And he's talking about saying, I want to make a donor advised fund. One, you could tie it initially just to the Gates program, minimum gift $100 million. It could then be opened up later, meaning you could give out more. It will be the largest fund in the world. And again, this is really the beginning in many ways of social impact investing taking place, or at the very beginnings of social impact investing. And he's bringing up a social impact investment fund. You need an advisory board for investments, distributions. You will need an administration mirroring a mutual fund. Again, let's remind, he's talking to a JP Morgan guy about his investment fund idea here. Tax compliance department dedicated to the operation. It will underpin a trust and estate department, the size of which will be enormous. I would suggest an IRS auditor full-time on site. A DAF stands for Donor Advised Fund, which is like an social impact investment fund. You will be able to take in funky assets. I don't know what these things are. Done right, it's $100 billion in 2 years. Basically saying we're going to put in several billion dollars initially, and you're going to come out with $100 billion in 2 years. Then he writes the thing that's highlighted here. The tension is making money from a charitable organization. Basically saying, how do we use a charitable organization to make a ton of money? Therefore, the money-making part needs to be kept at arm's length. Salaries are disclosable and closely watched. Farming the investments to a high bridge is a no-brainer, but must be done with airtight opinions and reviewed by committees. I thought of university heads, foundation chairs, boards. It will be the most, he said sought after, but I think he's saying the most sought after board in the country. And you got to remember, I'm going to just stop for a second. I'm going to come back to this. Jeffrey Epstein, and when people talk about the list of people Jeffrey Epstein knows, this is who he was. He was a goddamn capitalist Rolodex of people that different people knew from all sorts of sectors. And another article I'll show you, which I think is probably the most meaningful article I read, which talks about Jeffrey Epstein as really just a capitalist switchboard operator, basically connecting people to different people from different places into different things. But here's this idea now manifested. Now it comes to fruition, and with Bill Gates and JP Morgan and things like that. And look who's on that list. And again, I would say socialists could have known about this thing when it happened. And they could have, and then they would have been able to say something about it, but they weren't because they're fuckers and they're arrogant and they don't know what they don't know. So let's go to the actual event. So what comes off in 2011? He launches the Global Health Initiative Fund. Let's look at some of the names on this thing in addition to Bill Gates. Jamie Dimon, you've heard of that guy's name before. Jamie Cooper Hahn, this is the woman I was mentioning who is part of the Children's Investment Foundation Fund. Ursula Mueller, head of, or a big person in the World Bank. Klaus Mueller, another big German investment bank. Moncef Slaoui. Okay? Moncef Slaoui. I'm just going to stop at that name right there. Does anybody know who Moncef Slaoui is? Who is this motherfucker who is on this Global Health Initiative Fund? Michael, we're part of the left. Do we know who Moncef Slaoui is? No, we don't. Because we don't know who headed up Operation Warp Speed. Because the fucking left doesn't care. Because they thought Operation Warp Speed was something to help you. Was something that was going to make a vaccine accessible. You know where they found out about this motherfucker, Moncef Slaoui? He was there early in 2011 with the Global Health Initiative, the Global Health Initiative Fund. This is where these people get to know each other. It's not an accident that Moncef Slaoui was head of Operation Warp Speed, appointed by Trump, because he had connections to Gates and through the liberals as well. And so the left had no idea this kind of shit's going on.
I guess I gotta say, who are we talking about when we are talking about the left right now?
Socialists.
Because
us.
Not okay. Well, if we're talking about us, we're atomized little voices in the dark.
Okay, but all I'm saying,
it would be useful to me if we separated liberals from the left.
No,
when I was talking about Epstein being a culture war thing, that's how I. Sorry.
The people who knew that the capitalist class was the enemy of the working class, and that we needed a working class revolution to make that happen. Those people who were animated by that, that's the left I'm talking about. I'm not talking about liberals, and I'm saying that those people were in no position to identify the actual enemies, and yet had they followed a person like Jeffrey Epstein in the way that the so-called conspiracy theorists on the right were following this, they would have been able to see that this creature, Moncef Slaoui, was connected to the Global Health Initiative Fund, and be able to see that no way we can trust this thing. These people are deeply captured by something which is hiding charitable foundations and producing, and really what they are giant hedge fund-like operations to make millions of dollars off of social impact investing. And so that's what I'm getting at. I mean, that's not my whole point. That's a side point, but it's why I want to say that the left should have been able to sniff this out, but they were too good. We were too much better than the conservatives and the right wing and the conspiracy theorists. We would never dabble with Alex Jones. Never. We're above him. And yet that guy knew about those sorts of things. And no, he's a CIA op. And so this is not my point today, but because my point today really is that all of these things are what Michael said they are, which is this is capitalist class infrastructure to hide behind a charity. Look at this in that line. How do we keep the charitable organization at length from its money-making thing? You do it exactly the way you do it here. You put a woman like, what's her name? Mary Cooper. I want to get her name right. You put this pleasant-looking woman, Jamie Cooper Hahn, president or a head of the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. You put her face in front of an organization which is ultimately about hurting children, either directly through their bullshit vaccine programs or indirectly through being basically this whole thing put together by people who are pedophiles and trafficking children. So this is how the system works. We put up your pleasant face with a Children's Investment Fund Foundation Fund name, but behind it is this is really the architecture of evil and exploitation and abuse, and that's how it works. And so this to me is what's interesting about this, which is like how conscious they are. And I don't mean just Jeffrey Epstein, because there was another letter that was sent to Jeffrey Epstein where they said, we know you don't care about the good part of things, but you know how important it is to make money. That was a line said to him by him. But we think this is an interesting idea because this guy is kind of used to launder morality. Like, we want to be the moral face that you can help us construct in front of people so we can make billions of dollars and use people as we choose. And that's what I believe is meaningful for me about Jeffrey Epstein, is that he's connected to corporations that way. He's connected to academia that way. He's connected to the CIA and Mossad this way as a catalyzer of constructing an effective lie.
Well, I feel like next time we change the topic and you ask me to make an off-the-cuff explanation of how I thought about something and I ramble for a minute about random associations, then it becomes like the basis of a political disagreement. It's like, this is kind of stupid. It's kind of stupid. I'm like, okay, so now, but that's okay. Let's go back. Let me start at the beginning. People on the right had the right instincts during COVID. It was exploited, and now actually we're learning more about how all these Peter Thiel fucks, they set up this QAnon thing. I mean, they all the online right stuff, right? And the liberals lapped it up. And yeah, are the remaining organizations of the left opportunists because they're dominated by, yeah, they're all fucking opportunist liars. They could have, of course, exposed, that, but if, they could have exposed the real class nature of COVID. But you can say the same thing going back. You could say the same thing about, the freaking war in Iraq. We didn't go deep enough or hard enough about. I mean, you could say that about anything. So my starting point was like noticing how, because when I read something about Epstein, I'm like, yeah, there's the ruling class. It fits my model. I already have that model. I'm like, these fuckers should have been taken down 100 years ago. This whole system should be redesigned 100 years ago, right? But then I noticed how other people take it up, and I remember it was like at jiu-jitsu, this guy was wearing a Epstein didn't kill himself shirt, and I remember thinking like, oh, that's like appreciating the sentiment and being like, I'm with you on that these people are liars, but then talking to him, he had been organized into this whole QAnon discourse, which was right into this, the left-right paradigm, which is actually a hoax. So I think right now when I hear people talk about the left, I'm sort of like, well, who the hell are you talking about, right? And maybe the distinction is that you think there's nothing worth talking about in the left, and I'm like, actually, our tradition is almost always right about these things. The real working class tradition that points at this stuff and says, well, you know what just happened? Hundreds of people were just murdered in a manufacturing plant in Sri Lanka, and you don't give a shit about it. Every single day producing the basic necessities of life. People are brutalized and destroyed, and none of you have anything to say about it. That's our tradition, Andy. Like, go, like that's the real, that's, to me, the left does not confuse itself with liberals. Okay? And so if I'm using those words incorrectly, whatever. But I do think that the most important way to understand this is a class analysis, which was traditionally at the heart of what, we would call the left, right? And a class analysis, says there's no distinction between Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation. The Gates Foundation and Bill Gates are the same project. The co-optation that you're talking about, which has been a massive project post civil rights era, has been exactly this NGO nonprofit model where you've got the Gates Foundation doing really good work on one side, and what is the major project of the profit making? It's all the completely repressive AI technology. I mean, like Bill Gates buying up all the farmland. I mean, these guys, these people, and this infrastructure they have built. The liberals, or like the failure left, tries to distinguish between like the foundation and the capitalists that run the foundation, but it's all part of the same strategy. And it's also like it's old, right? It's like, we're going to set up the charity to help those poor girls learn to read, while also making it very difficult for young girls to survive without working 12 hours a day in a goddamn factory. I mean, this is old, but it's now so much more sophisticated. And partially I'm just like, the only hope I see in this situation is that I do think people are like, when you compound this, there's a layer of people who are seeing just how disgusting the system is and see this as a systemic problem. And I don't know whether they're left or right. Kind of depends on who's organizing them. But this Epstein situation, to me, just further exposes to some people, but it also in the system enters as spectacle, and they're gonna, a few people will get in trouble on to make it seem like the system is somehow fair. But even if they are brought to justice on the basis of child trafficking, are they going to be brought to justice on all the other stuff that their investments create, on the massive ecological destruction that's caused by just like building data centers or drilling for oil or extracting minerals out of the ground? Like, to me, those things are not separated from people raping children. Those things are all part of it. And that's goes back to the other episode we had with our guest, which is that, like, it makes complete sense that Jeffrey Epstein was like this finance, he was in finance, he was in intelligence for the U.S. and for Israel. It makes perfect sense that was intertwined with science, because under capitalism, science is about extraction. Mm-hmm. And so it makes complete sense that if you are invested in this system and trying to make your way to the top of this system, you're going to learn how to extract whatever you can, and you will be rewarded for it. And the absolute impunity, because there's been no real organized class struggle to hold these people accountable, it makes all of this very predictable. They just keep getting away with it, and therefore they're going to keep doing it and do it more. And I still don't understand, really who turned against Epstein and why we're actually learning about it now. Or is it true that somehow if too much information gets out, they have to deal with it? Because this is not about accountability. The fact that we're even being shown any of this stuff is not about accountability. It's about managing. It's about managing public perception about the system. That's what I think.
Managing is very correct. How much is not being released and redacted, or just what is being controlled, sent to us, the rest of us, right? And the one thing that you shared, Andy, that article, I think is quite key because it is like he acted like a switchboard or, like a operator and a connector between intelligence, bank, institutions, financial and educational, and people, wealthy people. And so I just don't think that everything is going to be shown to us. Nothing that, no, I'm say take that back. The most important elements of whatever that there is hidden will not be released.
Yeah. And I mean, there are other creatures like him running around. I mean, they don't,
Yeah,
he's just an example of one,
right.
and he's a Western example. I don't know what sort of functionaries operate this way in China or Russia. There were ties between him and people in Russia. Most of them, the way I look at him though, is very much uh, the creating the West, that and his connections to the Trilateral Commission, things like that. I mean, they may be jettisoning this person called Jeffrey Epstein, but they're not jettisoning the infrastructure that he helped build that connects the United States to Germany, the U.S. capital to German capital. And so when Brian Berletic says the U.S. is not going to be fighting Germany, that's how we can know. That's not how they constructed this thing. They've constructed it to be an alliance that is led by the United States. And then others would say it's not the United States, though others would say it's led by the Rockefellers or Rothschilds, and they're the ones, doing that. But that's not how I see it. I look at this as a class divided thing. So yeah, I feel like the most meaningful thing that can be learned about Jeffrey Epstein is what he represented in terms of exposing the structure of the system. And I think one of the things I'd like to do is maybe go to the other article that I sent, and then read maybe this will take a little bit of time. Read the back end part, because I thought it was a pretty good description and might answer Michael's question of why is he being revealed now. I don't have an answer to. I do believe it's like the pot bubbled over, so there were shit exposed. There's things inside the pot that need to still be hidden. But you might have to then talk about some of the things. Why is there such a mess on my kitchen table, kind of thing, or on the stove? You have to explain that. So now they're trying to do that. I think there's that piece. But this guy who wrote this article, the second article, let's see if I can go to it. So the title, or the Substack is "The Price of Freedom is Eternal Vigilance," and he wrote an article called "Epstein, the Switchboard Operator." Although I guess the person goes by ESC. I don't know what that means, but this was sent to me by my brother's wife.
It's short for escape.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, right. On a keyboard, right? Yeah. Okay. So here's a summary. This is the final part, and I'll read it. This was a man credentialed by David, speaking about Epstein, this was a man credentialed by David Rockefeller, seated on the board of Rockefeller University, admitted to the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, embedded across three branches of the Rothschild dynasty, in regular correspondence with former U.S. Treasury Secretary, a former White House counsel, a former Israeli prime minister, a former European Commission for Trade, the chair of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, and the president of the United Nations General Assembly, who had designed the impact investing vehicle with J.P. Morgan's most senior executives, specified the tokenized digital currency architecture to Larry Summers, pitched sovereign digital currency to Dubai's ruler, that's SBC, funded the AI and cryptographic research now deployed by central banks, and placed personnel into the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, NHS Digital, I don't know what NHS stands for, Goldman Sachs. And, here's a summary of things he was involved in: AI classification, digital currency, impact investing, the proof of concept of these things in the Global Health Initiative Fund, which is what I had mentioned. So he actually put into play something that would embed social impact investing with ultimately things like that were going to be used to justify things like digital currency, and AI was going to be used. And I think this is probably the best summary of it. The mechanism Epstein designed with Erdos. Erdos is another JP Morgan person. The concept he escalated from social good bonds through social good currency to sovereign digital currency, the research portfolio assembled, all had been transferred from the informal coordination layer to the formal institutional infrastructure. The switchboard had completed its function. What remained was the risk. A man who had seen the entire construction from one position that connected all the nodes, whose lawyers had just raised the possibility of cooperation. The system does not need a switchboard operator once the wiring is in the walls. That's an interesting idea. But I also liked something else that he said. This, I think, for me, this is the most important thing. What the emails document, read alongside the previous essays, is the construction of a society whose economics had been engineered around a social good, a common ethic, with AI as the enforcement mechanism and the sustainable development goals as the ethic. The moral authority of the sustainable development goals is the system's most important asset. 17 goals that no decent person can oppose and compose: end poverty, clean water, gender equality, climate action. The emails show that the people positioning themselves behind this moral authority are not who the brochure describes. And that, to me, is like as much a nutshell as what you could say. Is like, these emails show who is behind this brochure they're selling you with the social development. What are they? With these developmental goals that they talk about, sustainable development goals they talk about. And that's why I started talking about this as a lie. And I think that is the most important, is to try to use a creature like Jeffrey Epstein, who's not even the worst of the worst, actually. And like we talked earlier about, I think the kinds of things that go on in Bohemian Grove are probably meaner and nastier than some of the things we're at least seeing happen at Epstein Island. But this is it's a world in which child exploitation, human trafficking, and child trafficking is being told that we're doing something about by the people who are actually its worst criminals. And that's the world we live in, the brochure versus the reality.
I mean, I essentially agree with that analysis. I think the specific plans, like the social credit systems and stuff like that, are, to me, a logical development of capitalist impunity, control. They're working to centralize even more their power over everything, and this is how the technology is developed and how they're planning to do it. And so it's this is what this system produces. And some of the people who've called this out, the most consistent voices calling this out have been, go back to Marx and the radical labor movement. And there's also opportunists on there too, but like the actual analytic frame that helps us see this is material and historical material, that this is the tradition we're in. And I guess that's the thing, that because it's that way of viewing things from a class analysis is an accurate model, people are converging towards that independently, which is why you now see, like following this libertarian channel, they're starting to go basically back towards essentially class analysis, because they're asking the question like, well, why do politicians want to use immigrants to cheapen our labor? So there's like the libertarian anti-immigrant folks, and then you think about, and then they hit upon this idea of like, oh, the logic of the market is to drive down wages, which is why the U.S., or not just the U.S., which is why capitalists are always trying to pit people against each other. And, and that's just one little example of like, this is a model that people will uncover if there's honest, I believe if there's honesty, right? And so I'm not sure what I'm trying to say other than we don't have any mechanism that's truly honest to take these things on in an organized way. And I guess it's sort of like my feeling is really having a class analysis about these things makes me so isolated and constantly feel like I'm crazy. However, there's moments of crisis like this where you see, people are like, oh yeah, this whole system is disgusting, right? But then what do we do with that? So I don't know. And partially I'm just like maybe tired of hearing my own voice around this stuff, but I did want to just share a few things,
Go ahead.
other people's things that I saw, and this is just if I had spent more time curating, there'd be more examples. But like here on Instagram, Mike with a communism Palestine flag and the red triangle, which is about targeting, which is from genuinely is wild seeing every single left-wing political theory being proven absolutely right over the space of a few days. It's forwarding something. This is bleak. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays, explaining to Epstein that he doesn't need to fear possible popular revolts against financial elites because capitalism and pop culture have pacified social movements and people now prefer consumer goods over social justice. But this gets even better because this is an email from 2014. Okay, this is from 2014. Do you remember what was happening with like the and this is about the Super Bowl? You remember what was happening around 2014?
Not. Let's see.
No, it's
Trying to
14
think.
is
It's
a bit
definitely
away.
it's after
Caesars Jones gives you a hint over here.
that wasn't the.
People were taking a knee.
Oh, right. The knee thing, right? Yeah, gotcha. Yep.
Okay, now, and I may need to check the timeline. It doesn't matter that much. The point is that Jess Staley, this big banker guy, is like, you want to know why we are not Sao Paulo? And I believe he's talking about Sao Paulo, Brazil, where there's huge sections of, there may have been big protests, but I believe he's talking about the way that there's basically sections of Sao Paulo in Brazil run by warlords. Watch the TV ads on the Super Bowl. It's all about hip blacks in hip cars with white women. The group that should be in the streets has been bought off by Jay-Z. And what they're talking about is essentially the anger and energy around Colin Kaepernick taking a knee was essentially usurped and redirected by Jay-Z. Black capitalism comes along and makes it look like, oh, capitalism's cool. We just need to, be cooler capitalist types and stop worrying about, police violence. Then there's this one, which is, I have a critique of this person, but in a way, I want to know what people think about this kind of thing, which is political maturity is finally admitting to yourself that the angriest, most disconcerting communist you've ever met was pretty much right about everything. Now, I'm not sure exactly who she's talking about, but when I read this, I think of myself being disconcerting to people because I'm like, actually, the whole system is fundamentally corrupt. Okay, and she basically goes through this argument that like basically the entire system. This has shown us again, the entire system is completely rotten, built on exploitation and violence, and our training has been to basically associate anything having to do with economic democracy with communism, and communism is no, bad, right? So so this is the kind of stuff I've been seeing where it's like, yeah, you know what? We're isolated and powerless, but like the world keeps showing us stuff that is confirming these things. And I don't know if, more people are, I don't know if more people are learning from this situation, but it certainly is one of many different examples of ways to get an insight. Okay, and I still think that this is true, that people who are, have a class analysis essentially have the most lucid and correct understanding of imperialist extraction. They have the most lucid and correct understanding of Western warmongering, global power dynamics, white supremacy, institutional racism, and misogyny. That's why they keep being proven right about everything from U.S. military actions to the fascism of the far right, to the abusive nature of the so-called moderate liberal, to the moral depravity of billionaires and the capitalist class. And who are we talking about? It's vague here, right? You could plug in your most opportunist, but what I'm experiencing now is that there's a very clear connection between all of these things and a systemic problem, and at least seeing this kind of thing is like, yeah, and the people who are supposedly all in agreement around this, the most wild communists, are actually not in agreement about what to do about it. We don't have actually any real organization on the ground that has an impact on things, and people's general instincts are aligned with this analysis at first, but they do not. But they are, heavily propagandized. But I do think that, I don't know, it's kind of hopeful for me to see things like this, although, I don't know what to do with it exactly, other than say, yeah, wow, I should not doubt myself so much. I should actually be very confident in my analysis that this system is disgusting, and this system rewards this kind of thing. And for what it's worth, that's the thing that I had to share from the pop culture world of like, wow, leftists are really, certain leftists in the sense of class, people with class politics are taking this in what I see as essentially, a generally right direction, which is to point it at the entire system itself. Now, but I don't know, I should shut up and maybe do something. But right now I just feel it's like having your worldview confirmed and also making it feel like you're more fucking isolated. It's like I want to feel less isolated around it. I want this to be confirmation, but I actually feel even more isolated because there will be no organized response to this that has any impact.
Eduardo, I have something to say to that.
Yeah, say it, Andy, because
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with Caitlin Johnson. I think bad communists. We're liars. We are lying.
Yeah.
I want to say we don't trust communists. We fucking tried to put you in a trap. We tried to get you injected. We hid so much from you. We tried to tell you that Colin Kaepernick was the beginning of an anti-racist movement. It was a corporate attack on us. And so we didn't try to expose any of that stuff. We ridiculed people who tried to warn you about that. We didn't tell you about social impact investing. We didn't tell you about AI. We didn't tell you about digital currencies. We hid all that from you.
But that wasn't you. You didn't do that.
Yes, I'm part of that tradition. I'm part of that tradition. I'm sorry. Before it can be a truth, we have to see.
But you're actually lying by saying that you did it, Andy.
No,
you didn't do it.
But I'm just talking about communism. Andy is not communism. Andy is communist. Communism thinks that when you talk about communism, when you talk about 1,000 people in a room who call themselves communists, you got a 1 in 1,000 chance running into me. what you're mostly going to hear is that China is communist, is that vaxes were good, go get your shot, and you are going to hear something about Mamdani. That's what you're going to hear. Who, by the way, there's pictures out there that suggest Mamdani might be connected to Epstein. Whatever. I don't know what to make of that. That's AI shit, then, possibly.
The
But anyway,
timeline on
I think
that
it was
is
his mother,
probably-
right?
it's
That
AI
had some.
right. Yeah. Anyway, but I don't want to get into that part.
Yeah,
but look, I personally believe that communism has to get right with itself before it can put itself in front of working people and say, communism and communists are to be trusted. By and large, if you walk into a room of 1,000 of us, you are going to be lied to by 999 of those people. And therefore I go, stay away from these people. Don't be very careful when you're around communists. Be very careful when you're around leftists, because they're more likely to not try to lie to you than they will tell you the truth. And so that's why we have a lot to answer to from our tradition and our past. Yes, Michael, I agree with you. I still call myself a Marxist. I think that framework has helped me see some of these sorts of things. But to speak of our tradition, in my opinion, in anything other than a way of betrayal, that is why we are in such a bad situation. We shouldn't have been in this situation, Michael. Our side should have known all along what was going on. But we couldn't even admit 9/11 was an inside job. We ridiculed people who said that kind of stuff. We couldn't speak to actually how horrifying and monstrous our capitalist class was, because we ourselves weren't willing to believe that, because we were tailing liberals. And those were our people that we had to work with. And so we had to talk about these things. We should have naturally been drawn to the people who were seeing the worst of the system, and we're able to expose that. We wouldn't have gone the same way they went, but we would have gone our own way because we have an independent set of politics. But that's not how the communists went. We were opportunists through and through, which is just a bigger polysyllabic way of saying we're liars. And so the reason you and I are so isolated, and that is sad, is because the communists fucked it up so badly. And I'm part of that tradition. And that's my explanation for why a world has gotten worse and has actually exposed itself to be the thing you and I are not so, it's not so difficult for us to see, but we are in this situation that we have nothing to speak for it. There's nothing for us to organize around with ourselves, because the communists fucked it up so bad. And that's what I'm saying. Our isolation is our own fault. And
that's the part that's the part that I don't fully agree with. It's a struggle. There's a struggle. Yeah. I mean, yeah, elements of our tradition definitely messed it up. But what I see now is a constant attempt to erase any sense of actual organized working class pushback. The thing that is most under attack right now is the idea that working class people can unite and actually dream of something else, push for something else. Like, that very basic idea has been routed out of the class with all of the sophisticated, pretend left, nonprofit is the right way to go to make change, two-party bullshit, right? And so it's not just like, oh, we lost because it's all our fault. It's like, no, there was a goddamn struggle. And the lying hurt us. But not everyone lied the whole time. There was always a struggle for being honest, right? I mean, even within our own dang organization, right? There was a struggle to try and be honest, right? And so it's not just a one-sided thing where like, oh, we're the ones who fucked everything up. We're so bad. We have to because it's sort of like, what is that? You just we have to be like, yep, you're right. The communists are the bad. Like, we have to start there. That's not where people are at.
Well,
I mean,
you have to start.
somewhat.
That's my feeling is.
But
for
people,
me,
but the basic form of organizing and deciding together and doing something rooted in that is something that the ruling class absolutely does not want. And COINTELPRO grew up and was institutionalized and became part of the global, NGO nonprofit network. And now what people are talking about actually on the ground is, are we going to just vote or not?
Right.
You know, how are we going to change things? Are we going to, you know, and the actual history, the actual real history, which actually provides any kind of confirmation that there could be another way, is constantly under attack. Which is why when I talk about our tradition, I'm talking about the people who said, everyday working class people, we need to organize ourselves. We need to basically work to unite people to shut down production and reopen it in a way that supports human needs. That very premise is the tradition I'm talking about. And that premise is one that is dangerous to the system, that they hate. And anti-communism in the United States has also meant anti-anything having to do with economic demands. So to me, I'm like, actually on the ground, I need people to see what really actually happened in the past. And that, of course, does mean exposing the bankrupt, fake communist liars. And, you know, but the basic practice, the actual thing that's going to convince people is actually doing a thing that is very, very under attack by the capitalists, which is get together and think about how are we going to change things. Because to me, that's how you actually make a new, honest, you rebuild the core of the ideas is in actual practice.
Look,
So where do you start? You start by saying, you're right, communists are bad. I mean, it doesn't actually have any, it doesn't help people on the ground
I think
necessarily, unless that's the question they come to.
I think it does, because it's about, like, it's the reason why when we had our round 2 to round 3 to talk about Venezuela, the first place I started with was, I thought it was going to be the next Vietnam. Clearly wasn't.
Yeah.
I have no credibility to say jack shit about anything until I first acknowledge, like, this is what I thought, but this is where I was wrong. And now that's just in terms of speaking. Like, so I say no one should listen to me, like even what I'm saying, unless I'm actually going to be honest with you about where I'm coming from. And people do not need the label communism to exist to go and struggle. Tomorrow, Adrian, UESF union is going to go on strike. Now, Adrian has already, I've talked to AJ, and probably it's a CTA organized. There's a lot things are being generated towards the elections and like that. Regardless, if they go on strike, that's a good thing. Class struggle does not need communists to happen, but class struggle does need communists if we're going to have a revolution. And it's the reason we won't have a revolution is because communists want to lie. And they want to lie because it's more comfortable than acknowledging our past. And so I believe that we need to get away from hiding from ourselves and from other workers who we're trying to talk with and work with, hiding, like, just how fucked up our tradition has been. I'm sorry, I just have to say that, because it's not going to be an easy road. And other traditions have their own fucked up thing, but I believe that that's necessary. I believe that's part of being honest with people, is part of earning their trust, to not try to gaslight them, to not try to give them good news. And so that's where I'm coming from. I don't have an answer for how to organize, but I do things the way I do them for a particular reason. So part of the reason we're having a disagreement is because this is how I approach things, and you may have a different approach. That's fine. But I know there's a reason why I do the things the way I do them. And one of the things, I am not proud of what communists have done recently. I call myself a communist, but if a person comes at me and says, I don't trust communists, I'm like, I'm with you, brother. I understand it. I'm a communist, and you shouldn't trust me. I don't think you should trust an anarchist. I don't think you should trust a libertarian. But as a communist, There's no reason to trust me. Now let's start to talk. And that's my approach, at least. And I think that Caitlin Johnstone and she was a person who got COVID right. I think she's trying to sweep a lot under the rug that cannot be swept under the rug. I understand how we're seeing our moment here, but I'm sorry. There's so much history here to expose about how poorly the communists have done our job of organizing workers towards a revolution, that history is going to have to be unearthed as part of really being able to play a potential role in making a revolution. That's my feeling.
Well, I agree with that. But I'm like, the ruling class makes it about communism. Like, you can say we don't have to talk about communism, except that the ruling class comes and says, oh no, it's bad communism. It's their main bogeyman still.
Yeah.
It's their main bogeyman. So, and I also think the conversation is actually completely fucking irrelevant unless you're actually in motion trying to do something with people. I mean, and that's the other thing. It's like, I'm not gonna sit there and say, you're right. Communists are the problem. When that's not even accurate. That's not a holistic picture. Like, that's not true. Communists are not the problem. The broad thing of communist practice has had terrible things in it, right? But like right now, when we're talking about what do we do right now, is the first thing we do right now to like reject all the communists, because there's hardly any left anyway. I mean, it's not like there's a big CPUSA that has an influence over. Anyway, point is, I agree with you. We have to be honest, but partially what we have to do is point out how the ruling class, the current ruling class, is lying to people, and they try and associate any struggle for people uniting to demand any kind of economic democracy with the worst crimes of Stalin and the worst crimes of Mao. Right? They associate it with dictatorship and autocracy, and yet here we are in an autocratic, murderous, genocidal. I mean, it's just like, first people have to like actually have a critical stance on what the ruling class is telling us. That's harder than to get people to say, you're right, communists are bad. That's easy. Getting people to jump on board and say, you're right, communists were wrong. That's easy. If people are actually in motion together trying to figure out what to do, then those questions about what happened in the past become relevant. But not really until people are actually talking about what do we do. So that's why I'm like, in general, you know what? Yeah. Mostly in general, right now, the people who are saying they're communists, I would say if you get them in a room, you're more likely to hear something much more accurate about why the world is the way it is than if you're in a room filled with fucking fake ass Democrat nonprofit. Oh, we just have to vote. We just have to build which is the dominant thing. I mean, and I think that's part of the problem is like, we are not dominated by fake communists right now. We are not. That's not what's happening in the United States or in Europe. We're not dominated by fake communists. We are dominated by lying fucking liberals and lying fucking right-wingers who work together to both gang up on this idea of communism, because the very idea, the root of the word communist, is communal, running things communally. That very idea is completely under attack. And if we can't seize on crises like this that are happening on the top organizationally, then of course we're never going to get anywhere. And the lying that people did, trying to be smart and tail the liberals, that is also a big part of why we're so weak. And I agree with that. So I'm just, I don't know. I feel like it's really easy to be, dismissive of the concept of communism, but at the same time, it's becoming, I feel, much more clear to people like that this is the opposite of how the world is organized. It is not a communally organized world. I don't know.
We'll leave it at that.
Sorry.
No, it's good. Eduardo, what do you think? As a means of signing off, possibly.
No, you're going to be upset with me. I'm actually not trying to sign off at this moment. I'm actually, we're talking in, I don't think you both intend to talk in theoretical terms, because we don't. Here on What's Left, we try to apply whatever we are talking about in the real world. And, but I think maybe the public may not be able to understand this in our arguments that we're making. So I think I'm going to bring it down to the nitty-gritty of the real world politics. So we've discussed Epstein, and I think now we've gone into another rabbit hole, but we're discussing communism, the criticism of socialism and organization, and not just organization like an entity or a group of folks trying to organize. I'm talking about organizing on the streets. And my greatest criticism and real world life examples are what's happening, as you alluded to, in California, where there is a wave happening of teachers, uh, hospital workers, of strikes that are going to take place or have taken place, such as the Kaiser workers. But I have a strong criticism around it, and maybe this is up for another episode. But since we're on the topic of what the tradition, it's not my tradition. I have had maybe fantasies of socialism, but I've more inclined to maybe real life working groups in other countries that are more autonomous and self-governing, such as the anarchist groups that I've mentioned in the past. But I'm still, I think, more aligned with my socialist comrades than I would be with, libertarians or small government anarchists that believe in a capitalist system. So I think I may have a vote and voice to say around socialism. And I agree that there is something to say of your tradition, which is it has been in cahoots with the government and its 9/11 agenda, COVID scare agenda, and which is the whole reason why I have lots of anger, maybe, or resentment, and I'm trying to deal with it around some of these recent waves of strikes, because it was teachers who, not like you two, but it was the majority of teachers who were doing Gestapo calling out of other teachers like yourself, Andy, who were trying to create and organize with working families. It was the teachers who were against families, working class families. It was the teachers who were separating the professional class from the working with your hands class. That's my way of putting it, the peasant class. It was the teachers who were aligning themselves with the police state. And it was the teachers who were asking families to take the burden when they were themselves mingling in COVID parties and circles and creating learning hubs for their kids and asking other families to stay home, because this phrase, safer at home, was the motto. When friends like, I can't say her name, my friend social worker, was running from home to home trying to report abuse, real abuse that was happening. And every time I talk about her, I get kind of emotional because she had it. She couldn't deal with it. And so it was the teachers who were saying and minimizing that kind of suffering. So I'm just looking at this recent waves and I'm wondering, what else are they asking from working class families? And I'm going to mention a few names because I'm not trying to create, as we say in Spanish, chisme, or in English, rumors, but rather because these people they're online, they're public figures. And so I want to make sure I say that to premise what I'm going to say next, because I don't want to instigate. I want to just call out. And I said this to you once, Andy, because you were running to be the vice president of UESF, the United Educators of San Francisco. And I said to you, I don't remember if it was here on What's Left or if I said it to you in private. I think I might have said it to you in private. I said to you, Andy, do you realize, though, that if you become the vice president, because you were running, you were postulating yourself, I said, do you realize that I might have criticisms of you once you wear that hat? And whether we are friends, like we could be friends, I could always cherish you on a personal level. But the minute you wear the hat of someone that is taking charge in leadership, you come with power. And we are voting, because I was part of the same union as you were, and we were part of the same faction at that time. I didn't go to all the meetings, I should admit. But, remember that the faction that we created, well, I didn't create. You, Adrian, and a few other folks created. And so I remember telling you that. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I'm just equally going to make that same statement right now. If anyone, whoever it is, if you're my friend or whoever, if you take on a leadership role, you have a great responsibility. So I don't want to hear whining and crying from anyone. And I think the same goes for me. If I was to take a leadership role, we've been online for years now. If anyone has criticisms of me by holding this mic, shall be it. That's a fair thing because we have a small, prominent voice. But it's online and we make ourselves public and we're not living some private lives. I would be more abhorrent if we were attacking anyone that was living their private, small, non-internet lives like Jessica, who's trying to, live her life out. But we choose to be out here. And so I say that to my former friends and my former comrades, because I don't no longer consider them comrades. And I'm going to speak specifically to the UESF, United Educators of San Francisco leadership, who are deeply tied to the major union leadership at the state level and the national level, who are also being run by Democratic operatives. So I want to show a few images that make me upset because I think it's only fair. So if you just give me a sec, because I'm also going to get kind of nervous in showing this, Andy, so you can edit if it need be. I organized before, and we worked together with such folk. We talked about socialists and criticizing. Here we go. Here is former union rep of mine, a co-rep, Frank Lara, who is deeply involved, and he's asking for California schools to be to hold out because they're going to go on strike. And he served since 2021. I personally had a prediction where I thought they were trying to use COVID-19 as a way to scare teachers and families into voting for them for the leadership. But who is he connected to? As, by the way, we're compatriots. We're both Mexican. And, I had long admired his organizing efforts, and I still do. But when you are also being awarded as pride of the union by the CFT, California Federation of Teachers, then I have doubts because I thought he was a socialist. And the California Federation of Teachers are deeply tied to the Democratic Party. And I would love to see, workers actually organize and be proud within their urban circles. But this is who I'm seeing when I don't see on a personal level. I'm not going to attack anything, mischaracterize who he is, what I know of him, his partner, his family. I have nothing to say there. I have everything to say about the California Federation of Teachers. Everything to say about the leadership at UESF and their constant mentioning of COVID-19 lockdown. And this is what I think for me is the biggest thing, because I wondered where is the pride in having been a socialist. Another former friend of mine who I also deeply admired and who I also had on here. Again, nothing to say about her family, nothing to say about her private life that I know, nothing to say about the countless dinners we partook in the past, nothing to say about the COVID parties that we saw each other in, nothing to say about anything on the personal level, but everything to say on the political level. So that is what I'm here to discuss. And who is this person? Here, another socialist, online, public knowledge, nothing that I'm sharing that's personal. Natalie Rizzi, educator socialist, PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation, and Breaking the Chains, which I used to love their magazine and have bought various copies. And I'm just wondering, like, where is the socialism in the politics of where leadership is heading right now with the strikes? Is it because of the midterms? Are we funneling our folk over to the Democrats? Are we turning them in? That's what I'm wondering about. And these are the questions I have for both Frank Lara and Natalie Rizzi. The reason why I mentioned this is because I saw there was, excuse me, let me see, the article that was once published that we had strong disagreements over and we never actually settled. This is an article by Natalie Rizzi. Fight for Public Education and Make It Right. This was dated the 2nd of June, 2020. Fund Our Schools. In March, schools started to close across the country. They closed too late, meaning she wanted them to be closer earlier. Our unions and educators made the school closures happen in the first place because we understood the need to address COVID-19 pandemic. It's admitted right there. I'm not saying anything outside of what is public. And it's always, we worried about our students and family. You did not worry about your students and families. You never did. If you did, you would have aligned with the families when they were asking to return back to school and when they were knocking at the doors of the district and their schools and to be back at brick and mortar institutions that belong to them. You never, this is such a lie. We worried about our students, and the videos, I don't have them with me, that circulated that these were only white families asking to go back. These weren't white families asking to go back. SFUSD surveyed families across San Francisco, and what did they say? Results showed that Black and brown families were the ones at the top that wanted to return. So it was all just lies in front of people. And so I still have a lot of upsetness over the fact that haven't been any acknowledgement, no apology. And I truly feel, again, the re-asking or the demand for families to take the burden again, which I would support a strike whenever you call it, by the way, at any moment, in asking families to do so, by the way, if they also called out the Democrats. They won't, because they're tied to the larger unions that they're connected to. The leadership has an NFT, the CTA, they're all connected to these great institutions that work around funnel money to the Democrats. And so I'm wondering if that's what they're trying to do to us again, to turn us over to the Democratic base. So that's what my criticism is. We're discussing. Let me pull up my own, my tabs here. I have long championed like labor rights when I was a part of the union, involved in the assemblies, admired history in the making, wondered how we could bring about revolution. We discussed it in an episode. You mentioned that the key to it, I remember because I asked you, you said the key would be, as you thought it then, would be through the unions, Andy. That's what you said. And I had, it would reinvigorated me into thinking that that was where I needed to place all my energy and focus. And then when we did an episode with John Kleisik about how the unions had a series of networks that were created that were connected to wealthy donors, to people, institutions like the ones that were involved with Jeffrey Epstein and his cronies and everyone involved. I'm thinking, where is the legitimacy in a working class revolution that are tied to people who are at the elite top? And so I don't trust UESF leadership in asking families right now. And the reason why I'm even talking about this is because my own nephews and cousins are in SFUSD districts. This isn't like disconnection from me. By the way, I could criticize it even if they weren't involved in there. I was a former UESF member, and I feel like this is, again, another way to make people think that this is the way, that we have to support us. This is teachers. Frank Lara came on to a Spanish language radio show. I heard him and asking families, support us, support us. I don't buy into this call for support when I don't see true alignment with real working class folk, but more alignment with people who are political operatives in the deep state who have ties to the very person we're talking about, and the future billionaires, the Jeffrey Epsteins of today's world, which are Elon Musk and all the other billionaires we've mentioned, criticized, and the people who are tied to Palestine. And we're discussing or asking folks to support leadership that are tied to all the different chains of the pyramid to the top. That's what my criticism is. I would always welcome a strike. And actually, the greatest strike that I saw that had no ties, but at least to my knowledge, was a strike that we mentioned last year. Was it last year, Andy?
Mhm.
With the prison guards that have probably zero political alignment with me, but have maybe one thing in common, which is autonomous, self-governed strike that were basically let go of and abandoned by the Democrats and the Republicans, conservatives and liberals alike, seen as anarchy. Do you know?
Mhm.
And so that's what I think this is about. The strikes aren't isolated. They're a nationwide uptick in movement for a base that's anti-Trump. That's what it is. But I don't think we're clear on seeing what Obama, Biden, Trump, they're all the same. So that's what I've been thinking about as you both were discussing and criticizing the left, and particularly the socialist tradition, because these are self-named, self-proclaimed socialists. I just shared their pages. They claim it themselves. I'm not saying anything different. Anyone could look over them. This is all online. They're public figures. I'm not discussing private lives. I repeat, I'm discussing public lives that have been exhibited by themselves and, according to that site, funded by themselves. So this is my criticism. And I would just equally criticize you both if you both wore a leadership role.
Thank you for making it very concrete, Eduardo. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have a lot of carefulness around my language when I'm speaking, so I have to make sure it's concise in what I'm trying to communicate, because anything can go AWire, as we have learned in 2021. I just wanted to say we should revisit that conversation we had about unions and how they have been powerfully politically connected to California politics, to larger institutions, electoral politics, corporate funded policy spaces, media and think tank ecosystems that have largely embedded themselves to the Democratic Party infrastructure. So these are things that I am worried about and that are being asked of us. And it's just so fucking annoying, them constantly asking families to do so, to go support, to go do that. Because, of course, as you have mentioned, this is your saying, Andy, this is the most important election of the year. So, any of these.
Of our lifetime.
Of our lifetime.
Yeah.
Of our
Lifetime.
lifetime. That's right.
Yeah.
The Democratic campaigns are the most important elections of our lifetime. Always. They're always important. I think they're more important to their policy partnerships than it is. But
Yeah.
anyhow, so yeah, there's a lot to say around that.
Well, I also I think the question of unions, there's a very good discussion to have, because I think there's also it's parallel to like the cooptative apparatus, the way that the legal system has basically grown up to ensure that the officially organized unions, but that apparatus had to be built because the actual content of workers organizing for themselves is something that's dangerous. So like the unions as they exist now, are not going to be the vehicle, but the kind of the general modality of workers uniting, deciding together what and how to do, that is the thing, that is the form that has very different content when it happens outside of the legal system, right? So there's a dynamic struggle that leads to that co-optation, and it doesn't mean like anything that looks like a union organizing is bought off, right? But it matters how it's connected to the state, and that's what you're bringing up. And like part of the travesty of PSL folks siding with the lockdowns is they were basically siding with the state in just first of all depriving families of an actual material resource that was important for their own sanity, which is like kids have to go somewhere else for a while. I mean, it's very basic. Like people need childcare so that they don't go fucking crazy. I mean, that's like, to me, the first thing about the lockdowns, it's like, no. People need childcare or this is terrible for everyone. And then layer on the other problems with it. They fucking sided with the state and built and basically put a big wedge between themselves and the communities they're supposedly sticking up for. So I'm with you, Eduardo. I'm just like, you want people to sacrifice for you now? Like, when did you ever, like, what did you actually ever sacrifice for people? When there was a time to stick up for real people, you were all about yourself and, by the way, sided with the state.
Yeah.
And so, that does fuck up when we talk about communists. You're right. That's bullshit. And that's, so the broad labels, not useful. I admit.
It still stings. That whole operation still stings for me. And I hope if they ever, I doubt they will, but if they do come across this video, any of the people I mentioned and people I did not mention who I wanted to mention, I hope they know that I'm so angry at people who are sitting at national tables with elite actors and governors at French Laundry restaurants and Nancy Pelosi with her hairdress place. Like, just all these people who had access to information at the top and who knew, like in the UK, we're having COVID parties in government offices, what the toll and the sacrifice they were asking for the rest of us to make. And even if you genuinely were afraid and believed that there was some plague happening, and you might have taken maybe a sort of middle stand, like myself in the beginning, who did wear masks and did ask for safety protocols, and even sprayed Andy with lots of my alcoholic spray
Sanitizer. Yeah.
sanitizer, and asked him to wash his hands, and told him to wear his face mask, and he got upset with me. You know, when you finally shelve your emotions for a bit and you start to try to wonder what's really happening here, and then you do know what's happening, and then you still choose to take on the fight for, not against COVID measures, then it's like, oh no, then you're not acting out of ignorance at this point. Now you're truly complicit. And that was my strongest anger. It's the complicity. It's the coalition. It's the contribution to. It's the active connection to that I cannot forgive, because you turned everyone in. And that is upsetting. So, maybe those scars won't heal. But anyhow, so let us conclude. That does it for this week's episode. We have entered into so many realms, anyone can comment. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes where we found this episode, or on our blog at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. And I remind you, you can always look at my past over the years, evolutionizing and changing dramatically in front of everyone. So if I have said anything to criticize your political stand, you can always look at my personal political stands and see how they've evolved. I remind folks, if you fancy anything you've heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, BitChute, others YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. You can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes, wherever you found this episode. If you would like to give us feedback, you're more than welcome to. If I've criticized you and you think I've put your name and picture out there and you want to come here and talk to me, you can always do so about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover. Contact us at our blog and Andy will get to you, and I promise you I will respond immediately if you think I've directly attacked you. I am Eduardo Barca with co-hosts Michael and Andy. Thank you both very much for being my loyal comrades, and I will hope that you accept my criticisms of you two at the future if you both wear leadership roles as well. Seeing your face pictures online and on videos of What's Left forever. Thank you for listening. Check us out for next time. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday or wherever day this lands on. Ciao.